One of my earliest memories starts with me sobbing. I refused to be subdued, no matter what Mum and Dad tried. Dad gave up and left the bedroom, but Mum took me in the kitchen and sat me down at the breakfast table. Come, she said, as she pulled a sheet of wrapping paper from on top of the fridge. For years, Mom carefully sliced open the wrappings around Christmas gifts and saved them on the top of the fridge in a thick stack. She set the paper down, plain side facing up, and began to fold it. I stopped crying and watched her, curious. She turned the paper and folded it again. She pleated, packed, tucked, rolled, and twisted until the paper disappeared between her cupped hands. Then she lifted up the folded paper packet to her mouth and blew into it, like a balloon. Come, she said, Lahu. She put her hands down on the table and let go. A little paper tiger stood on the table, the size of two fists placed together. The skin of the tiger was the pattern on the wrapping paper. White background with the red candy canes and green Christmas trees. I reached out to Mom's creation. Its tail twitched, and it bounced playfully at my finger. Row, it growled, the sound somewhere between a cat and rustling newspapers. I laughed, startled, and stroked its back with the index finger. The paper tiger vibrated under my finger, purring. 这叫折鸡, Mom said. This is called origami. I didn't know this at the time, but Mom's kind was special. She breathed into them so that they shed her breath, and thus moved with her life. This was her magic. Dad had picked Mom out of a catalogue. One time, when I was in high school, I asked Dad about the details. He was trying to get me to speak to Mom again. He had signed up for the introduction service back in the spring of 1973. Flipping through those pages steadily, he had spent no more than 3 seconds on each page until he saw the picture of Mom. I'd never seen this picture. Dad described it. Mom was sitting in a chair, her side to the camera, wearing a tight green silk cheongsam. Her head was turned to the camera so that her long black hair was draped artfully over her chest and shoulder. She looked out at him with the eyes of a calm child. That was the last page of the catalogue I saw, he said. The catalogue said she was 18, loved to dance, and spoke good English because she was from Hong Kong. None of these facts turned out to be true. He wrote to her, and the company passed their messages back and forth. Finally, he flew to Hong Kong to meet her. The people at the company had been writing her responses. She didn't know any English other than hello and goodbye. What kind of woman puts herself into a catalogue so that she can be bought? The high school me thought I knew so much about everything. Contempt felt good, like wine. Instead of storming into the office to demand his money back, he paid a waitress at the hotel restaurant to translate for him. She looked at me, her eyes halfway between scared and hopeful when I spoke. And when the girl began translating what I said, she started to smile slowly. He flew back to Connecticut and began to apply for the papers for her to come to him. I was born a year later, in the year of the tiger. At my request, Mom also made a goat, a deer, and a water buffalo out of wrapping paper, then ran around the living room while Lahu chased after them, growling. When he caught them, he would press them down until air went out of them and they'd become flat, folded up pieces of paper. I would then have to blow into them to reinflate them so they could run around some more. Sometimes the animals got into trouble. Once the water buffalo jumped into a dish of soy sauce onto the table at dinner. He wanted to wallow like a real water buffalo. I picked him out quickly, but the capillary action had already pulled the dark liquid high up into his legs. Also, Lahu liked to pounce at sparrows when he and I played in the background. But one time, a cornered bird struck back in desperation and tore his ear. He whimpered and winced as I held him and Mom patched his ear together with tape. He avoided birds after that. Then one day, I saw a TV documentary about sharks. Mom made a shark for me, and he flapped around on the table unhappily. I filled the sink with water and put him in. He swam around and around happily. However, after a while, he became soggy and translucent and slowly sank to the bottom. But Mom made a new shark movie, this time out of tinfoil. The shark lived happily in a large goldfish bowl. Lahu and I liked to sit next to the bowl to watch the tinfoil shark chasing the goldfish. When I was 10, we moved to a new house across town. 2 of the women neighbors came by to welcome us. Dad served them drinks and then apologized for having to run off to the utility company to straighten out the prior owner's bills. Make yourself at home. My wife doesn't speak much English, so don't think she's being rude to you by not talking to you. While I read in the dining room, Mom unpacked in the kitchen. The neighbors conversed in the living room, not trying to be particularly quiet. He seems like a normal enough man. Why did he do that? Something about the mixing never seems right. The child looks unfinished. Slanty eyes, white face, a little monster. Do you think he can speak English? The women hushed. After a while, they came into the dining room. Hello there. What's your name? Jack, I said. That doesn't sound very Chinesey. Mom came into the dining room then. She smiled at the women. The 3 of them stood in a triangle around me, smiling and nodding at each other, with nothing to say, until Dad came back. Mark, one of the neighborhood boys, came over with his Star Wars action figures. Obi-Wan's Kenobi's lightsaber lit up, and he could swing his arms and say in a tinny voice, "Use the Force." I didn't think the figure looked that much like real Obi-Wan after all. Together we watched him repeat this performance 5 times on the coffee table. Can you do anything else? I asked. Mark was annoyed by my question. Look at all the details, he said. I looked at the details. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to say. Mark was disappointed by my response. Show me your toys. I didn't have any toys except my paper menagerie. I brought Lahu out from my bedroom, but then he was very worn, patched all over with tape and glue, evidence of the years of repairs Mom and I had done on him. He was no longer as nimble and sure-footed as before. I sat him down on the coffee table. I could hear the skittering steps of the other animals behind him in the hallway, timidly peeking into the living room. Shao, Lahu, I said and stopped. I switched to English. This is Tiger. Cautiously, Lahu strode up and purred at Mark, sniffing his hands. Mark examined the Christmas wrap pattern of Lahu's skin. That doesn't look like a tiger at all. Your mom makes toys for you from trash? I never thought of Lahu as trash. But looking at him now, it was really just a piece of wrapping paper. Mark pushed Obi-Wan's head again. The lightsaber flashed. He moved his arms up and down. Use the Force. Lahu turned and pounced, knocking the plastic figure off the table. It hit the floor and broke. And Obi-Wan's head rolled under the couch. Rawr, Lahu laughed. I joined him. Mark punched me hard. This was very expensive. You can't even find it in the stores now. It probably costs more than what your dad paid for your mom. I stumbled and fell to the floor. Lahu growled and leapt at Mark's face. Mark screamed, more out of fear and surprise than pain. Lahu was only made out of paper after all. He's your stupid, cheap Chinese garbage. He brought up the 2 pieces of paper and threw them at me. When he left, I spent a long time trying, without success, to tape the pieces, smooth out the paper, and follow the creases to refold lahu. Slowly, the other animals came into the living room and gathered around us. Me and the torn wrapping paper that used to be lahu. My fight with Mark didn't end there. Mark was popular at school. I never wanted to think about the 2 weeks that followed. I came home that Friday at the end of the 2 weeks. Shuzu hai ma, Mom asked. I said nothing and went to the bathroom. I looked into the mirror. I look nothing like her. Nothing. At dinner I asked Dad, do I have a chink face? Dad put down his chopsticks. Even though I had never told him what happened in school, he seemed to understand. He closed his eyes and rubbed the bridge of his nose. No, you don't. Mom looked at Dad, not understanding. She looked back at me. Sha, jiao, chink? English, I said, speak English. She tried. What happened? I pushed the chopsticks and the bowl before me away. Stir-fried green peppers with 5-spice beef. We should eat American food. Dad tried to reason. A lot of families cook Chinese sometimes. We're not other families. I looked at him. Other families don't have moms who don't belong. He looked away. Then he put a hand on Mom's shoulder. I'll get your cookbook. Mom turned to me. 不好吃? English, I said, raising my voice. Speak English. Mom reached out to touch my forehead, feeling for my temperature. 发烧了? I pushed her hand away. I'm fine. Speak English, I was shouting. Speak English to him, Dad said to Mom. You knew this was going to happen someday. What did you expect? Mom dropped her hands to the side. She sat, looking from Dad to me again, and back to Dad. She tried to speak, stopped, and tried again, and stopped again. You have to, Dad said. I've been too easy on you. Jack needs to fit in. Mom looked at him. If I say love, I feel here. She pointed to her lips. If I say I feel here. She put her hand over her heart. Dad shook his head. You are in America. Mom crouched down on his seat, looking like the water buffalo when Lahu used to pounce on him and squeeze the air out of the life of him. And I want some real toys. Dad bought me a full set of Star Wars action figures. I gave the Obi-Wan Kenobi to Mark. I packed the Paper Menagerie in a large shoebox and put it under the bed. The next morning, the animals had escaped and took over their favorite old spots in my room. I caught them all and put them back in the shoebox, taping the lid shut. But the animals made so much noise in the box that I finally shoved it into the corner of the attic, as far away from my room as possible. If my mom spoke to me in Chinese, I refused to answer her. After a while, she used more English. But her accent and broken sentences embarrassed me. I tried to correct her. Eventually, she stopped speaking altogether if I was around. Mom began to mime things as she needed to let me know something. She tried to hug me the way she saw American mothers did on TV. I thought her movements were exaggerated, uncertain, ridiculous, graceless. She saw that I was annoyed and stopped. You shouldn't treat your mother that way, Dad said. But he couldn't look me in the eyes as he said it. Deep in his heart, he must have realized it was a mistake to have tried to take a Chinese peasant girl and expect her to fit in the suburbs of Connecticut. Mom learned to cook American style. I played video games and studied French. Every once in a while, I would see her at the kitchen table studying the plain side of a sheet of wrapping paper. Later, a new paper animal would appear on my nightstand and try to cuddle up to me. I caught them squeezed them until the air went out of them, and then stopped away in the box in the attic. Mom finally stopped making the animals when I was in high school. But when her English was much better. But I was already at the age when I wasn't interested in what she had to say, whatever language she used. Sometimes, when I came home and saw her tiny body busily moving around in the kitchen, singing a song in Chinese to herself, it was hard for me to believe that she gave birth to me. We had nothing in common. She might as well have been from the moon. I would hurry on to my room and continue my all-American pursuit of happiness. Dad and I stood, one on each side of Mom, lying in her hospital bed. She was not yet 40, but she looked much older. For years, she had refused to go to the doctor for the pain inside her that she said was no big deal. By the time an ambulance finally carried her in, the cancer had spread far beyond the limits of surgery. My mind was not in the room. It was the middle of on-campus recruiting season, and I was focused on resumes, transcripts, and strategically constructed interview schedules. I schemed about how to lie to the corporate recruiters most effectively so they offered to buy me. I understood intellectually that it was terrible to think about this while your mother lay dying. But that understanding didn't change how I felt. She was conscious. Dad held her left hand with both of his own. He leaned down to kiss her forehead. He seemed weak and old, in a way that startled me. I realized I knew almost as little about Dad as I did about Mom. Mom turned at him. I'm fine. She turned to me, still smiling. I know you have to go back to school. Her voice was very weak, and it was difficult to hear her over the hum of machines hooked up to her. Go. Don't worry about me. This is not a big deal. Just do well in school. I reached out to her hand because I thought it was what I was supposed to do. I was relieved. I was already thinking about the flight back and the bright California sunshine. She whispered something to Dad. He nodded and left the room. Jack, if... She was caught up in a fit of coughing and could not speak for some time. If I don't make it, don't be sad and hurt your health. Focus on your life. Just keep the box you have in the attic with you. And every year, and Qingming, just take it out and think about me. I'll be with you always. Qingming was the Chinese festival for the dead. When I was very young, Mom used to write a letter on Qingming to her dead parents back in China, telling them the good news about the past year of her life in America. She'd read out the letter out aloud to me, and if I made a comment about something, she'd write it down in the letter too. Then she would fold the letter into a paper crane and release it, facing west. We would then watch as the crane flapped its crisp wings on its long journey west, towards the Pacific, toward China, toward the graves of Mom's family. I don't know anything about the Chinese calendar, I said. Just rest, Mom. Just keep the box with you and open it once in a while. Just open. She began to cough again. It's okay, Mom. I stroked her arm awkwardly. 孩子, Mama, I knew. Her cough took over again. An image from years ago flashed in my memory. Mom saying I, and then putting her hand to her heart. Alright, Mom. Stop talking. Dad came back and I said I needed to get to the airport early because I didn't want to miss my flight. She died when my plane was somewhere over Nevada. Dad aged rapidly after Mom died. The house was too big for him and had to be sold. My girlfriend Susan and I went to help him pack and clean the shoe place. Susan found the shoebox in the attic. The Paper Menagerie, hidden in the uninsulated darkness of the attic for so long, had become brittle, and the bright wrapping paper patterns had faded. "I've never seen origami like this," Susan said. "Your mom was an amazing artist." The paper animals did not move. Perhaps whatever magic had animated them stopped when Mom died. Perhaps I only imagined that these paper constructions were once alive. The memory of children could not be trusted. It was the first weekend in April, 2 years after Mom's death. Susan was out of town on her endless trips as a management consultant. And I was at home, lazily flipping through the TV channels. I paused at a documentary about sharks. Suddenly, I saw in my mind Mom's hands as they folded and refolded tin foil to make a shark for me, while Lahu and I watched. A rustle. I looked up and saw that a ball of wrapping paper and torn tape was on the floor next to the bookshelf. I walked over to pick it up for the trash. The ball of paper shifted, unfurled itself, and I saw that it was Lahu, who I hadn't thought about in a really long time. Rawr. Mum must have put him back together after I'd given up. He was smaller than I remembered. Lahu stopped playing. He got up, jumped with feline grace into my lap, and proceeded to unfold himself. In my lap was a square of creased wrapping paper, the plain side up. It was filled with dense Chinese characters. I'd never learned to read Chinese, but I knew the characters for Sun, and they were at the top, written in Mom's awkward childish handwriting. I went to the computer to check the internet. Today was Qingmi. I walked downtown to get help and a translator. A young woman agreed to help. We sat down on a bench together and she read the letter aloud to me. The language I had tried to forget for years came back, and I felt the words sinking into me, through my skin, through my bones, until they squeezed tight around my heart. "Son, we haven't talked in a long time. You're so angry when I try to touch you that I'm afraid. And I think maybe this pain I feel all the time is something serious. So I decided to write to you. I'm going to write in the paper animals I made for you that you used to like so much. The animals will stop moving when I stop breathing. But if I write to you with all my heart, I'll leave a little bit of myself behind in the paper, in these words. Then if you think of me on Qingming, when the spirits of the departed are allowed to visit their families, you will make the parts of myself that I leave behind. All this time, I still haven't told you the story of my life. When you're little, I always thought I'll tell you the story when you're older so you can understand. But somehow that chance never came up. I was born in 1957 in Sigulu village, Hebei province. Your grandparents were both poor, peasant families with few relatives. Only a few years after I was born, the Great Famine struck China, during which 30 million people died. The first memory I have was waking up to see my mother eat dirt so that she could fill her belly and leave the last bit of flour to me. Sigulu is famous for its Deerzi paper craft, and my mother taught me how to make paper animals and give them life. This was practical magic in the life of the village. For the Chinese New Year, my friends and I made red paper dragons. You would have loved it. Then came the Cultural Revolution in 1966. Neighbor turned onto neighbor, and brother against brother. Someone remembered that my mother's brother, my uncle, had left for Hong Kong back in 1946 and became a merchant there. Having a relative in Hong Kong meant we were spies and enemies of the people, and we had to be struggled against in every way. Your poor grandmother, She couldn't take the abuse and drew herself down a well. Then some boys with hunting muskets dragged your grandfather away one day into the woods, and he never came back. There I was, a 10-year-old orphan. The only relative I had in my world was my uncle in Hong Kong. I snuck away one night and climbed down a freight train going south. Down in Guangdong, a few days later, some men caught me stealing food from a field. When they heard I was trying to get to Hong Kong, they laughed. "It's your lucky day. Our trade is to bring girls to Hong Kong." They hid me in the bottom of a truck along with other girls and smuggled us across the border. We were taken to a basement and told to stand up and look healthy and intelligent for the buyers. Families paid the warehouse a fee and came by to look us over and select one of us to adopt. The Chin family picked me to take care of their 2 boys. Get up every morning at 4 to prepare breakfast. I fed and bathed the boys, shopped for food, did the laundry and swept the floors. I followed the boys around and did their bidding. If I was slow or did anything wrong, I was beaten. The boys did anything wrong, I was beaten. If I was caught trying to learn English, I was beaten. "Why do you want to learn English?" Mr. Chin asked. "Do you want to go to the police? We'll tell the police that you're a mainlander illegally in Hong Kong. They love to have you in their prison." 6 years I lived like this. One day, an old woman who sold fish to me in the morning market pulled me aside. "I know girls like you. How old are you now? 16? One day, the man who owns you will get drunk. He'll look at you and pull you to him, and you can't stop him. The wife will find out, and you will think you really have gone to hell. You have to get out of this house. I know someone who can help." She told him all about American men who wanted Asian wives. If I can cook, clean, and take care of my American husband, he'll give me a good life. It was the only hope I had, and that was how I got into the catalogue with all these lies and met your father. It was not a very romantic story, but it's my story. In the suburbs of Connecticut, I was lonely. Your father was kind and gentle with me, and I was very grateful to him. But no one understood me, and I understood nothing. But then you were born. I was so happy when I looked in your face and saw shades of my mother, my father, and myself. I'd lost my entire family, everything I ever knew and loved. But there you were, and your face was proof that they were real. I hadn't made them up. Now I had someone to talk to. I'll teach you my language, and we could together remake a small piece of everything I loved and lost. When you said your first words to me in Chinese, I had the same accent my mother and me. I cried for hours. When I made the first dirty animals for you, and you laughed, I felt there was no worries in the world. You grew up a little, and now you could even help your father and I talk to each other. I was really at home now. Family found a good life. I wish my parents could be here so that I cook for them, give them a good life too. You know what the Chinese think is the saddest feeling in the world? It's for a child to finally grow the desire to take care of his parents, only to realize they were long gone. Son, I know you do not like your Chinese eyes, which are my eyes. I know that you do not like your Chinese hair, which is my hair. But can you understand how much joy your very existence brought to me? And can you understand how it felt when you stopped talking to me and won't let me talk to you in Chinese? I felt like I was losing everything all over again. Why won't you talk to me, son? The pain makes it hard to write. The young woman handed the paper back to me. I could not bear to look into her face.